Hey guys, today we're gonna do an HTC Vive lens swap. We're gonna swap the Vive lenses with the Gear VR from 2017 because we are actually supposed to get better sharpness, bigger sweet spot, less God rays, and better overall optics. Well, I'm very excited about this, so I'm gonna go step by step doing all the procedures needed, and if you would like to try this by yourself, this tutorial might really help you. Also, after this tutorial, I'm gonna talk a little bit about the risks doing this and also the issues and things that you should know before you start to pop out those Vive lenses. Guys, I hope you're gonna enjoy it. Join me now. So let's begin with the lens swap. The adapters for the lenses are 3D printed and I ordered them from Thingiverse. They have 3 flaps that make sure that the lenses stays in place and not falls off once you put them on. But first, let's disassemble the Gear VR. We're gonna take out the 2 lenses of the Gear VR, and the only tools you need are some small screwdrivers. So there are a lot of screws on the Gear VR and we need to take them all off, of course. And the whole process is quite straightforward. But take note that there are also 2 hidden screws beneath a tape in the middle. Once you're done, remove the first lid and you'll find more screws. Yes, there are quite many of them, maybe 10 or 12, and you need to unscrew them all. Once that's done, I was really struggling to find out how to even take off that second lid, and eventually I just ripped it off. Yeah, I know it's wrong, but hey, it was just a plastic little thing that went off. No biggie. So now we're getting there. It's time to remove the lenses. It took me some time to realize how to make it, but eventually I found out that you need to push at least one of the 3 holes nearby the lenses, and as soon as you push it with a small screwdriver, the lens is gonna loosen up. Once the lens is loose, turn around the headset and take out the lens. Do the same with the second lens, of course, and now we're getting to the fun part. So let's get rid of all the trash, because well, probably we'll never need that Gear VR again. So we can attach the lenses to the lens adapters. And it's quite important that you do this correctly, so make sure that you don't push in the lens from the wrong side. Both the lenses and the adapters have a cutout of one of the sides, and make sure to align the flat surfaces before you push in the lens into the adapter. Don't be afraid to put some pressure on it, eventually it's gonna just snap in. So push a little bit with your fingers and then give it some love with a microfiber cloth. So as I said before, the lens adapters has 3 flaps, so there is really no risk that the lens will fall off, well, unless you drop them. Alright, it's time to put in the first lens inside of the HTC Vive. And once again, I need to clarify that you really need to be careful, and there is a risk that you could actually destroy your HTC Vive, so be very careful. Alright, and we're gonna grip a small screwdriver and pop out the Vive lens. It's very easy, you can use a small screwdriver or you can use a butter knife, as many people are recommending. So squeeze in the screwdriver between the lens and the plastic around it and try to bend it up. Once you put enough force, it's gonna just pop off, and then remove the lens carefully. Also, make sure not to scratch the lens while removing it and put it in a safe place. Now try to blow off any dust particles on the panels. And also do the same on the Gear VR lenses before you put them down. Now align the 2 flat surfaces and put down the lens adapter onto the hole. Don't put any force into it, just lay it down and make sure it's really sitting flat. Once you put it down, it's really gonna sit in place and it's not gonna loosen up. So there you have it. First lens is in, and what I'm gonna do now is not to put a second lens inside, because I want to make some comparisons. I want to do some through the lens recordings and compare the 2 lenses in many different tests. So let's put on the cover and start off the testing. I can honestly say that for me, the comfort was not an issue. I cannot feel any difference having those new lenses on. It's not pushing my eyebrows and I'm not touching those with my eyelashes either. Once inside Steam VR, I can clearly see that the sharpness is really improved. There are no God rays or glare, and also the sweet spot is just huge. Comparing it with the original HTC Vive lens, everything is so much more blurry at the sides and at the edges. I can hardly read the SweetViver name while focusing on the library logo. Also, the God rays or the glare is just ridiculous with those lenses, and overall the sharpness is just not there. I was never really thinking about that before I switched to those lenses. Switching back to the Gear VR lenses again, you can clearly see that everything is in focus and sharp. Going back to the HTC Vive lenses, no matter how much I try to adjust the camera and find a sweet spot, there is no, because everything is just blurry at the sides. One more comparison and you can clearly see the difference, right? So let's compare the two lenses side by side. The left one is the Vive original lenses and the right one are the Gear VR lenses. Well, the difference is like night and day. I was really not expecting that much of a difference for using cheap Gear VR lenses. I can see some slight barrel distortion, but I'm gonna fix that later on in this video with some tweaking. Now let's jump into the desktop mode in Steam VR to check the sharpness overall and see how much sweet spot we got with each lens. I'm gonna try to point around where I see the picture fully sharp. And as you can see with the HTC Vive lens, the sweet spot is really small. Switching to the Gear VR lens, the sweet spot is much bigger. It covers maybe 70 or maybe 80% of my total vision in this headset. The text is maybe not fully readable because of the resolution, but still it looks sharp and it doesn't look blurry like it does with the HTC Vive lenses. Looking into the lenses from a distance, even here you can see that the sweet spot is much bigger on the Gear VR lens compared to the HTC Vive lens. The Skyrim logo in Steam VR is just a big mess while looking through the Vive lens, while with the Gear VR lens it's fully readable and quite sharp also. So let's move on into the Steam VR home. With the Gear VR lens, everything is just sharp. I can read the text on the left side, but switching to the HTC Vive original lens, I can barely read anything on the left side. Look at the text on the left side, all the game names. It's just unreadable. It's just so blurry and stretched out. And well, it's all because of the low sweet spot with the HTC Vive lens. Let's switch back, and once again, it's like night and day. And as I said before, my camera is not lying. It really is a huge difference while looking through the lenses. So now we're gonna jump into a Steam VR home environment made by Real-O Virtual with a lot of cool test patterns that you can try out on any VR headset to check the sharpness, focus, glare and much more. So let's begin with the first test. This is actually a moire test, and of course due to the low resolution of the HTC Vive, there's gonna be moire on both of the lenses. But have a look at the rings in the middle. They're just so much more sharper and distinguishable on the Gear VR lens compared to the HTC Vive lens. And also if you look at the sides, at the black and white squares, they're just so blurry on the HTC Vive lens. And also we can see a few more rings actually by looking into the Gear VR lens, and that means that the lenses are a little bit more sharper. So it really shows you what good optics can do even on low resolution displays. Once again, turning back into the HTC Vive lenses, it really is a difference, and the sharpness of the edges is just really bad. Now let's do a color test. I know a color test may not say much about these lenses. They look quite similar in both cases, well, except for the better sharpness on the Gear VR lenses. But I can tell you that the HTC Vive lenses has a little bit more vibrant colors. I'm not sure if my left and right panels are differing in colors, but the HTC Vive side is clearly more vibrant. So moving on to the next test, which is also, well, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's a sharpness test or maybe a grayscale test. Well, you don't see much of a difference, but you can still see that it is much sharper using the Gear VR lens. The lines are just more blurry looking through the HTC Vive lenses. The next test is more important though. This is a very exciting one. This is a Snellen chart. You have probably seen those when you have been to an optician. We're gonna check if we can read those letters. Standing 2 meters from the chart using the Gear VR lens, I can clearly read the letters even on row 10. The 11 is a little bit blurry, but that is probably due to the low resolution. It still looks quite sharp all the way down to 11, and that's quite remarkable. Switching to the HTC Vive lenses, wow, here we see a difference. Already from row 9, everything starts to be very blurry. At line 10, it's almost impossible to read it, and at line 11, it's definitely impossible to read any of the letters, not even guessing. So as you can see, there is a huge difference in terms of sharpness switching between those two lenses. And have in mind, I'm recording this with a camera. I wish I could show you what my eyes are seeing, because the camera does not make the picture justice here. But still, anyway, you can still see a huge difference between those two lenses. And this could be a game changer in games, and especially in VR environments when you have a lot of text to read. And if you, well, for example, work in VR. Next test is a geometry and sharpness test. We're gonna see how it looks, first on the Gear VR lens of course, and as in the previous test, everything is just sharp, especially in the middle, but also at the sides. Look at the numbers on the ruler, I can clearly read those numbers still. Switching to the HTC Vive lenses, everything is sharp in the middle. I think the circle in the middle is maybe even sharper for some reason, and the contrast is a little bit better with the HTC Vive lens this time, but look at the sides and look all around. The sweet spot is just so small. It's a huge difference. So next test is gonna be another reading test. We're gonna see if we can read some texts from around 1 meter of distance. I'm only gonna try one distance in this test. And when using the Gear VR lens, I can seriously read all the text without even moving my head. I could just move my eyes. Switching to the HTC Vive lens, well, as you can see, the middle is sharp, but even at the far left and far right is blurry. It doesn't matter how I adjust the camera, it doesn't matter how much I try to find that perfect sweet spot, it's just not there. The sweet spot is in the middle, but everything on the sides, and especially at the bottom and the top, it's so blurry that you really have to move your head to read the text. Once again, with the Gear VR lens, everything is practically sharp. It's more sharp in the middle still, but it's still sharp at the sides and at the top and the bottom. So, well, we have 2 more tests to go. And then the next one is the glare test, or the God ray test. And as you may know, the HTC Vive lenses are very well known from having a lot of glare and God rays, especially in high contrast scenes where you have big contrast between the light and dark areas, just like here. And using the Gear VR lens, I can tell you that I can almost see no glare at all. Even when I step back a little bit to see the borders on the left and right side, I see no God rays or glare at all. Now let's switch to the HTC Vive lens, and suddenly the fresnel lenses of the HTC Vive is creating so much glare and God rays, or whatever you call them. And even though it looks a little bit different with your eyes compared to this camera recording, it's still a lot of glare. You're gonna see those rings, you're gonna see that there's like an aura around all the objects when it's dark around them. And this is what really is one of the biggest reasons why people actually decided to try those Gear VR lenses on the HTC Vive, because the HTC Vive lenses are really so bad in terms of glare and God rays. Especially now when we have some light areas both on the left side and the right side, and a dark area in the middle because of the Fresnel lenses. It's actually the rings on the Fresnel lenses that does it. And while switching back to the Gear VR lens, as you can see, almost no glare, almost no God ray at all, because these lenses are not Fresnel lenses, they don't have those rings, and they really help in terms of glare and God rays and whatever you may call them. Lastly, we're gonna do one more test with the glare, and that is by having the text on the bottom right side. As you can see, switching to the HTC Vive lens, we have a lot of glare coming out from the text, also coming out from the top left part of the image, which is very bright. So the contrast the image is really destroying the image with the HTC Vive lens. Now let's switch back to the Gear VR lens for a second, and everything, well, practically everything is gone. So the difference is huge. This is a game changer for people that cannot stand those God rays or glares or flares or whatever they are called. And yeah, I gotta be honest, I'm quite surprised with the performance of the Gear VR lenses. One more thing before we jump into the field of view test, let's check the charts from a distance, all of them. Especially look at the numbers at the floor. Using the HTC Vive lens, everything is blurry. At the left bottom side, you can hardly read the numbers on the floor. It's just a big smudge mess. Switching back to the Gear VR lenses, we can suddenly read the numbers on the floor. Well, this is magic. Yeah, so let's do the field of view test. A lot of people have been talking about that there could be a decrease in field of view, especially the horizontal field of view, while using these Gear VR lenses. Well, the vertical field of view is perfect. I can see no difference whatsoever, so I don't even have to test that. But we're gonna try the horizontal field of view now. So let's just move those blue sticks to each side until I can barely see them. I can still see them at the edges of each side. And when I see that the sticks are exactly at the edges of the left and right side, I will just drop them. And now we're gonna check the field of view. As you can see with the HTC Vive lens on the right side, we have a field of view of between 100 and 110 degrees. And that is what HTC Vive is supposing to have. Checking the Gear VR side, well, it's the same, to be honest. It's a little bit, it's not aligned perfectly. I didn't put it perfectly, but it was in between 100 and 110 degrees. But let's try it once again just to be sure. I'm gonna try to aim for that red spot in the middle. I'm gonna look at it all the time, of course, not moving my head. And then we're gonna split those blue sticks and put them at the edges of each screen. So it's quite an easy test, but it's a very efficient and very good test to make for calculating the field of view. So let's drop them again and check, and yeah, once again, between 100 and 110 degrees field of view. So far so good. I'm very happy with the Gear VR lens on the left side because it actually is giving me much sharper, much better picture overall, with the same field of view, with bigger sweet spot, with less glare, and overall it's just a huge improvement. But have in mind that the lens adapters are sticking out a little bit, just as you can see over here. It's maybe 4 or 5 millimeters more than the original HTC Vive lenses. But I'm using the 6mm VR covers face cushions, but still my eyes cannot touch them, my eyebrows are not touching them, and I'm not touching the lenses with my eyelashes either. So well, next step is to put on the second Gear VR lens, of course, the right one. And yeah, we're gonna do it just like last time, just put the screw in between the lens and the plastic around it and try to snap it off. Sometimes it's gonna take some time and you have to put some force, but better do that with your finger. Eventually it's gonna just loosen up. Once you have dust off your Gear VR lens and adapter, put it inside just like before, align the flat surfaces together and just snap it on. Don't worry, it's not gonna fall off. So now let's dust off both lenses as good as we can, and if you're not happy, you will have to open up those lenses again and dust them off again. I had to do that 3 times actually. So before we jump into a game, let's do the barrel distortion fix so we get rid of the distortion. Well, there is a full guide and the files needed for the fix, and it's made by a guy called Slick66. He has made a full tutorial on how you do this, and it's very simple. I'm gonna show you this now. The latest version of the code that fixes the barrel distortion is the version 3.0 that is supposed to get rid of, well, almost all or maybe all distortion and barrel distortion that's been there before. First off, you need to have Steam VR running, both the headset and especially the base stations. Go into this folder, it's on the program file Steam, Steam Apps, Common, Steam VR, Tools, Lighthouse, Bin, Windows 32 or Win32. There is a file called lighthouseconsole.exe and we're gonna double click on it. And first off, we're gonna back up our original distortion configuration in case you want to go back to the original HTC Vive lenses. So we're gonna start off by typing in download config and then what the file should be called. Well, let's call it 1, just like in the guide. And let's press enter. And now you see the file is created. This is the original one. So make a new folder and call it backup. Preferably, well, email that file to you. It's a very small one, it's 17 kilobytes. So back it up and copy it here. So you have a copy of it inside of the backup folder in case something goes wrong. We are going to open this file up with Notepad, and First off, you need to assign to open it with Notepad, of course, because this is a file without an ending. So let's go and open it up, and you're gonna see a lot of different texts. What we need to do now is to go into this. We're gonna take this version, the third version, and that is actually for the HTC Vive. If you're using HTC Vive Pro, you need to go with this latest version. So let's go here. I have the site already up here, and here is the full code. And this is what we need to put inside of that text file in between, well, tracking to eye transfer bracket. So here we have a raw paste data. We're gonna choose all and copy. What we're gonna do now is to replace all this text down to where this tracking to eye transform bracket is ending up. And to be sure what to actually replace, well, I know this already, so I'm gonna do that like this, but go back to the code here and check the last lines of the code you need to copy. You have a line called undistorted R2 cutoff, and then you have a bracket, another bracket, and a comma. So make sure to find those last lines, and there we have the undistorted R2 cutoff, and here are the numbers. They're gonna differ, of course, because that's depending on what headset you have. And this is my original settings, and here are the modified settings. So I'm just gonna remove all this in between those lines. I'm gonna take just delete, and now it's gone. And then I'm gonna take everything from here, like raw data, raw text, go back to the file, and paste it in where it belongs, over here. Let's go and do this. Once you're done, make sure to save the file, and remember, take a backup first before you do this edit. I'm gonna save it now, and it's gonna be saved like one again, and then I'm gonna go into the folder again, and I'm gonna do a copy of it and call it 2. We have the backup still in here, of course, but I prefer to just call it 2 just in case of. If you're unsure, open it up again with Notepad and check if those changes are really saved. If you go to the last bracket line, you're gonna see that it's 112 and 817 at the end, and that is the correct numbers. So yeah, close it down, and as the guide says, we are going to do the upload config 2 because we have named the file 2, of course. So let's go back to the console and do the upload config. I've already typed that in. So let's go and do this. This is it, and once you do this, the only thing you need to do now is restart Steam VR. I tried Skyrim VR with those new lenses, and I can tell you the difference is huge. The difference is really, really huge. The sweet spot is just so much bigger. I can honestly say that the sweet spot is the same as you get with the Samsung Odyssey VR headset. It's sharp, well, at least 70 or 80% of the vision. Well, even though you may not see the huge difference in games, you will gonna see them as soon as you start to read some text, for example, or see some characters at the sides of your vision. Like now when Lydia is at the bottom of my vision, or kind of at the bottom end of my sights, she's still quite sharp. And once the distortion correction is applied, I can tell you I could not see any barrel distortion whatsoever, at least not in games. Maybe a little bit in Steam VR still, but in games you will not see them. In terms of other issues, I'm going to talk about that in a moment. I will talk about every issue you may be worried about, so don't worry. But all in all, I can tell you that this is a huge upgrade, a very cheap one. It is a risky one, but it is a huge upgrade. And once you try those lenses, you'll probably not want to go back to the HTC Vive original lenses, that's for sure. Lastly, I would like to talk a little bit more in deep about this lens modification, and if you consider doing this, you should actually listen to this, because there are some risks that you are taking, there are some things that you should know and be aware of, so listen up guys. First off, the warranty, you can practically say goodbye to that, because HTC will probably not tolerate this kind of procedure you're doing with the HTC Vive, opening it up and everything, changing the lenses. So even if you switch back the lenses, you will probably lose the warranty if you still have one. Also, there are some risks that you are taking by doing this. especially while removing the lenses when you are using that screwdriver or a knife, because if you happen to put that screwdriver, well, too far in, you could actually hit those panels inside, and that could mean, well, that the panels break. Take your time and just do it step by step without rushing, because it could be devastating. A lot of you are actually worried about some issues by doing this lens modification. First one is barrel distortion. Well, yes, from the start, before you do the correction, the software correction that I just showed you, you will see some barrel distortion, and that is like objects that are supposed to be square or something, they're gonna look a little bit rounded. They're like gonna be like bent, and it's nothing that you will probably see in most games, but if you are in the Steam VR environment, you could notice that, and once you see it, you're gonna see it all the time. But I have good news also, and that the latest profile, the version 3, actually fixes them, because I couldn't see. Maybe one time I could see some kind of barrel distortion or something, or pupil swim or whatever it's called, but this is just so minor, and I know it is an issue, well, depending on who you are, how you look, how your face is shaped, and how far away your eyes are from each other. We're gonna talk about that a little bit later, about that IPD adjustment. So some people could actually experience the issues more than others, and I'm probably not so, well, I'm probably tolerant to see a little bit of barrel distortion, and I can still correct that in my brain, I guess. Another thing, before you apply that distortion, you could also see that the scale is not perfect. Some people are actually seeing that the world looks like zoomed out. Everything looks a little bit more smaller, and I'm not really sure that I saw that. Maybe I did, but definitely nothing that I saw after applying that correction, that distortion correction with the software. So I wouldn't worry too much about this scale issue. I know there has been a lot of talk about this on Reddit. There has been some posts. People are reverting back to the Vive lenses right now, but so far so good. I've been using it for, well, almost 2 days now, and I'm really happy with it so far. Next up, pupil swim. Well, the pupil swim, what is it even? I'm gonna read it to you so you really understand. This is basically a variation in lens distortion that you can experience as your eye rotates off the center axis, and this is something to do with the panel offset or something like that, and while you're moving around, well, things could look a little bit wavy maybe, and I don't know, I just cannot see that. I really tried, I really spent some time to see if I could see any kind of pupil distortion or pupil swim or whatever it's called, but I just couldn't see it. So maybe there's something wrong with my eyes, or just that, well, my lenses were, well, I was just lucky with the lenses, I don't know. But worst case, you could get some pupil swim, and if you can handle that, that is no problem. But I know that there are people that could get dizzy by this, there are people that could get motion sick by this even. So, well, have that in mind before you make this modification. Also, eye strain. Well, eye strain, I wouldn't say that you can get eye strain from this modification. This is all about the IPD adjustment. If you don't do the IPD adjustment right for your eyes, you should check that, check your number at an optician or something to really know what number you got there. I mean the distance between your eyes, the middle of your eyes. If you set it wrong, you will get, well, some kind of, what is it called again, eye strain. And this is actually a bigger problem now with those lenses. Maybe it's because those lenses are sharper, or maybe it's how they're constructed. But you really need to set the IPD adjustment right. I was not, well, using the HTC Vive with the old lenses, I wasn't that, you know, sometimes I could play on 65 IPD adjustment, sometimes at 68. My normal value is around 68. Sometimes I had it on 70 without even knowing it, and it still worked. Now I really have to set it on around 68 to get the perfect vision, to get that 3D depth right, and not get any eye strain. Well, I think that as long as you set the IPD number right, you will not have a problem with eye strain. But, well, the risk is still there, so have that in mind as well. And if we continue with those issues, I have to add that due to the higher, well, sharpness and better resolution maybe, or optical resolution, the screen door effect is actually worse now, because, well, I don't know, the original HTC Vive lenses were a little bit blurry, especially at the sides, but not even so 100% sharp in the center either. So it kind of blurred out the, well, the space between the pixels. That's what the screen door effect is about. And now having those super sharp lenses, it really makes the screen door effect even more apparent. So even if you bump up the super sampling to 2.0 or 3.0, I tested that as well, it's gonna be very sharp, but the screen door effect is really visible now, even more than before. And more issues, guys. There is a very big issue, and this is gonna be frustrating, and well, you're gonna have to spend some time. Once you open up the Vive lens, there's gonna be dust going inside. Well, in case you are working in a laboratory or something without any dust particles, then they're okay. But in a, well, regular home, you will always have dust in your air, and as soon as I open it up, I got dust inside. And not only dust on the panels, but also on the lenses. And the problem is that if you have some dust on the lenses on the outside, it's not a huge problem. You're not gonna even see it. But inside, on the inside of the lens, it's gonna be so obvious. You're gonna really see the least little particle on the inside of the lenses. So, well, I spent a lot of time to actually clean both of the panels and also both of the lenses from inside, from outside. I took them off like 3 times or so. So be prepared that you're gonna have to spend some time until you really get very clean room inside of those lenses, and especially on the panels, because once they're there, you're gonna see them all the time. It's even worse than dead pixels. Also, the lens adapters, if you are thinking about printing them by yourself or ordering them from Thingiverse, you really should use the 3.2 version or later. And this is at least the latest version made, because it has some improvements, and that is that they're more flat or something. They have been improved so they're not touching your eyebrows or your area around your eyes that much. And maybe this is the reason I'm actually not touching the lens adapters at all while wearing my HTC Vive, even with 6mm VR covers. I mean, I was actually expecting to have some problems with it, but I haven't. I think though that if you have a, well, low IPD value, which means that you will need to move the lenses close to each other, and you have a bigger nose like mine maybe, you will have some problem with the lens adapters squeezing your nose. That could happen. I'm not sure if it is gonna happen, but I tried to actually lower down the IPD adjustment to below 60 or something like that, and I felt that the lens adapters were starting to push on my nose. So have that in mind. If you have a very low IPD adjustment and you have a big nose, maybe this is not something for you, I don't know. So, well, let's move on to the good stuff. You have heard about it already, but first off, the biggest difference here is not even the glare or those God rays, it's the sweet spot. You know, if you never tried another headset than the HTC Vive or the Oculus Rift, you will probably not even imagine how much bigger sweet spot you will get by switching to those Gear VR lenses. It's quite crazy. I actually compared that to the Samsung Odyssey headset, and it was, well, practically the same sweet spot, which means that, well, most of the image, in fact, at least, well, let's say at least 60% or maybe 70% of the image is still sharp. So you don't really need to move your head to read all the text, for example, and you can just move your eyes so you can still read. And that was really not possible with the original HTC Vive lenses. So the sweet spot is the bigger pro here, and I'm still amazed actually. Every time I jump into VR now with the HTC Vive, I'm really like blown away. It's like, wow, it's so sharp. You know, if it wasn't for the resolution, I would think that this is a totally different headset. And also the sharpness, of course. I mean, the sharpness gets better because we have a huge sweet spot now, so it's gonna be sharper. And you may think that the resolution is limiting this headset a lot, and yes, it does, especially while reading text. But I can promise you that everything really gets sharper once you get some better optics in there. And well, I think that those cheap Gear VR lenses, I mean, I bought the Gear VR 2017 edition for less than 40 bucks a few months ago. And it like, I mean, good lenses should cost more than 40 bucks themselves, but it still produces so much better sharpness than those HTC Vive lenses. And have in mind that the HTC Vive Pro is still using the same Vive lenses. So despite higher resolution, you're still gonna have that bad optics. So in terms of sharpness, this is really a huge improvement. The guard rays are almost gone. They're still there sometimes, but they're not so apparent, and they're not so, well, they don't look the same. They look a little bit like kind of like an aura around, but it's not those, you know, the fresnel rings, those lines everywhere. And well, most of the time you will see no guard rays whatsoever. I don't know if it's called guard rays or glare or flare or whatever, but they're almost completely gone. And this is one of the biggest issues why people are changing to those lenses. Not for me actually, I was more for the sweet spot, but if you are really, well, having problems with the HTC Vive glare, you really should try this. And yeah, despite all the risks and all the bad stuff, I still think that you are gonna be amazed about it. And another thing, well, field of view. This is a very interesting one, because what I have read on Reddit and some other YouTube videos about it, some guys doing this mod already weeks ago, they're claiming that the field of view is smaller. And I really don't get that. Because I could not see any difference whatsoever. I mean, the lenses are smaller than the HTC Vive original lenses, but the field of view is exactly the same. Also, of course, after the distortion fix as well, there was just no difference. You saw that, you saw me test that field of view test, and it was practically the same field of view. And if it was any difference, then it was maybe like 1, 2 or 3 degrees, and that is not even noticeable. So I don't even know. Well, most of the people are actually doing this mod with the Gear VR 2016 headset, and maybe, correct me if I'm wrong, maybe those 2017 lenses are better. Well, in this matter, I don't know, but I promise you guys, I'm not lying. There is no difference whatsoever in terms of field of view. So it could be because of my face shape and my eyes. Maybe they're popping up a little bit more than other eyes. I don't know. But still, if I had a field of view decrease, I would probably not go for this mod. I will switch back because I'm very, very picky with the field of view. I hate the Oculus Rift field of view that is a little bit more narrow, especially using the TP cast, and I can see that all the time. I'm getting so annoyed about that. But with the Gear VR lenses, it's exactly the same as before with the HTC Vive and the original lenses. So what more? Well, the lenses itself. I mean, I'm not sure, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that those Gear VR lenses are made of glass, compared to the HTC Vive ones, which seems to be plastic or something. They're much lighter and they just feel plastic, and they're so easy to scratch. I actually scratched a side of one of the Vive lenses now during this procedure, but that was not while taking on and off. I actually did that while putting them on the ground or something, and I got a scratch. Nothing big, but still, it's easy to scratch them. And I think that it's gonna be a little bit more difficult to scratch the Gear VR lenses because they feel that they are made in glass. But having that said, please be careful, because once you destroy them, well, you have to buy new ones. But then again, it's a very good news that we can replace our lenses for the HTC Vive for, well, maybe 20, 30, 40 bucks by buying just another Gear VR headset. So that's a good thing at least. So yeah, all in all, this is a quite cheap mod, as long as you're not destroying your HTC Vive, of course. But I mean, the Gear VR is cheap, the lens adapters are cheap. I paid 15 bucks for a pair of these, including shipping, and it was made by a Swedish company actually through Thingiverse. and they're called the Solidify 3D Designs, and it took like 2 or 3 days to get them home, so I'm very happy for that. Thank you so much guys for making them for me. And well, I think it's worth a try if you are, well, if you have troubles with the glare, with the lens flares and God rays, and well, maybe the small sweet spot on the HTC Vive. I really think you should try this mod. It's worth a try. I know you will struggle a lot with the dust and so, you know, on the lenses and on the panels, but if you can handle that, I think you are gonna like this mod. Well, at least if your body and your eyes can accept that and not get some kind of motion sickness or whatever. So this is a very individual thing. I think this is not made for everyone, and a lot of people may not do this either because they're gonna break their warranty, so that's a kind of a stupid thing to do, of course. And I know HTC is gonna hate me for doing this video, but I don't care because they have made so bad lenses, and I think that those Gear VR lenses are so much better, so people should know about this. So I am personally recommending you to try this out because this really is a step up. And if you are, well, if you have an HTC Vive Pro, I think that the change will be even better. But if you want to risk an $800 headset to make this modification, I don't know, well, that's totally up to you. So anyway, I'm gonna leave all the links you need to the websites and to this mod and all the information you need in the video description down here below. So if you would like to try it out, check the video description and let me know how it goes. If you have tried that already, please let me know in the comments and we can have a cool discussion about it. Guys, I really hope that you enjoyed this video and that you found it helpful. Please give me some feedback, what you think, and please give this video some love because it took me more than 3 days totally to make this video. There's been a lot of editing into it, you know, so much cutting and stuff. So I really hope that you like this video. Anyway, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. I promise to reply to all your comments very soon, either tonight or tomorrow, but I'm gonna try to do my best. I've been so busy, but now I'm gonna be less busy at least. Also, thank you so much to all my Patreons. I really appreciate your support. If you'd like to support me as well, please join my Patreon. For only $2 you can make a huge difference, and well, because YouTube is not really paying off. So guys, thanks again, have a lovely night now and see you in my next video. Cheers.